You're listening to Girls, Ghosts, and Ghouls, a showcase of specters, spirits, and spooks, as well as the women who love them. Only on ZTO TV podcasts.
Timely, topical, and terrifying.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome again to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, where we are going to talk about Nosferatu and the Shadow of the Vampire, because you have to talk about them both, otherwise you're missing something. And this was Betsy's choice after Rebecca and I kind of like poked and prodded her into picking something. So, as you know, we have Betsy White and Rebecca Cunningham, and we're going to throw it to Betsy, and then Rebecca and I will just jump in every now and then with some points of interest.
So Nosferatu is from 1922, and it was directed by F.W. Murnau, and it's considered still one of the greatest horror movies ever created. It is an unauthorized and unofficial adaptation of Dracula by Bram Stoker, which is hysterical. And I quickly realized that depending on which version you watched, the names change. So our leads are Count Orlok, who is our Dracula-style character, Nosferatu. Thomas Hutter, who is also Jonathan Harker, depending on which episode or which version you watch. His wife is Ellen or Nina, depending on which episode you watch or which version you watch, which I thought was pretty fun. But the general plot is that Hutter/Harker works for a man named Herr Knock, who's the equivalent of Renfield. And he's being sent as an agent to go to this castle to meet a new client named Count Orlok, who's going to buy the kind of abandoned home across the way from where Harker and his wife, Nina Ellen, live. So she has serious misgivings about him going on this trip, but he's like, hey, I gotta go. And so they even allude to like, oh, his boss is real weird, which is pretty funny because he is, and he gets weirder as it goes, and it's really fun. But so he sets off and leaves his wife with some friends to stay so that she's
because you
safe.
don't leave women alone, married women alone in the 1920s.
She wouldn't have been safe with just her and her cat. So
no. Terrible things happen to you when you're a woman left alone.
Well, and judging from the settings and at least like minor costumes, I think he was considering this also set in Victorian times, similar.
Yeah, they were setting it to the age of Dracula.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, and to be clear, so the reason why they didn't have the rights is unclear. It's Albin Grau, who was the man behind it, who wanted it done. He wanted to do the movie Dracula. It never says in reality when you look it up whether or not he just didn't bother to try to get the rights from the estate or if they refused to give it to him. So either way, he just said, I'm going to do it.
What I had seen was there's the theory that Bram Stoker's widow had refused the permission. And as Murnau considered it essentially a low budget movie made by Germans for Germans, he just went in and said, I'm going to use this story and I'm just going to edit the names that's necessary for my use.
That's why I said it's up in the air. It wasn't fact or fiction. Like she may have refused, he may have never asked. And again, it was Grau who was the one who behind it, the producer who wanted it done. Murnau was the director, and he, worked out how they were going to do it without copyright infringement.
There was now she did win a judgment against him later. I'm not sure if it was the producer or director that she won the judgment against. But essentially,
it was actually the studio, the film studio.
Okay, yeah, and the majority of the copies were destroyed. They were all supposed to be destroyed, but a few prints did survive, and that's why we have, still this little gem of cinematography history with us still.
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Harker Hutter goes his way, and Ellen Nina is left with friends. And
with friends. No, you're fine. So he gets to the small town that is apparently outside of the lands where Orlok lives. And he gets to an inn and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go see Count Orlok. And they're like, oh,
It was a record screeching moment.
It was amazing.
Nails on chalkboard, everything stopped.
Everybody turns around and looks. And this, you would think that this would have been a sign to him, perhaps.
If not that, then possibly the book about vampires that he finds in his room and giggles at, which was a fun piece. Basically it gives him like, hey, there are vampires, and he's like, oh, pshaw, and kind of throws the book down, but still takes the book, which I thought was funny. And then
it's like taking the Bible from a hotel, I guess.
Like, do you know what? I'm just going to steal the vampire book. They don't need it. So he gets in a carriage to take him to Count Orlok's, and they get partway there, and the people are like, oh no, we don't go over there. That's where the phantoms are. And he's like, oh, you silly peasant.
You strange natives with your quaint ways.
Just takes off, and then he's met by an eerie carriage driven by a real weird dude. Who is definitely Count Orlok, but we're pretending like it's not. And this carriage comes and takes him up to the house, and then the doors mysteriously open without him touching them. And then he gets inside, and then Count Orlok walks up all creepy in his Nosferatu, and
props to Max Schreck, man. Woo.
Yes.
Woo!
I thought they did a very good job of taking this actor and making him just creepy as fuck.
And his physicality and everything in it. It's just
the way he carries his arms, they're so awkward. And I mean, seriously, like, you can completely understand why, because he was mostly a German actor, when this film made it around the world, people were like, who is this guy? Do you think he's really Nosferatu? Which we'll come into later. But you can totally see why people thought that. You can completely see where that came from.
Vampire, what happened?
Right.
A little point of note, the castle, Count Orlok's castle, is actually a Rava castle in Slovakia. Just in case you want to travel Eastern Europe, go check it out.
Well, I'll put a mark on that for, potential European vacations.
Why not?
Yeah.
So he gets there. They have like a really awkward dinner where Orlok is reading a newspaper and then glancing at him over with his big eyes. And he cuts his thumb cutting bread. And Orlok goes to stick it in his mouth, and Harker Hutter freaks out, and with reason.
As you should.
Right. And then
we don't know each other like that. That's something that
hello. Consent.
And he's like, and so then Orlok is like, it's too early to go to bed. Let's talk a while. And then he wakes up in a chair by the fire and realizes he has some kind of bite marks on his neck. And then
he had date rape even in that day. See, just not good stuff. Back to Rebecca's point, consent.
Consent. Orlok is horrible about consent.
Very much so.
So the next day, Jonathan wakes up. He has the bite marks. He goes outside to write a letter to his wife. And he writes the worst letter I've ever heard in my life. And he's basically like, I've been having horrible dreams and also woke up with 2 strange bite marks. Do you think that they're mosquitoes or spiders? Who knows?
Something
but his wife
also
can't be left alone. Sorry.
Yeah. Something we also forgot to mention, like during that, I think it was during that dinner where Harker, that's the version I watched, had Nina's pendant out, her locket.
That was in the next.
Later?
It's later this day.
All right.
Later this day, Count Orlok reappears from wherever he goes, and they're signing the paperwork.
You're right. Great. Yeah.
Like, here's where you'll live. You'll live right across the street from me. And then the pendant of Nina pops out.
Can we talk about the paperwork for a minute there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Looks nothing like any kind of legal contract anywhere. It's like basically got some bizarre runes that may or may not be Hungarian/Germanic,
I did
but it
read
is
some
not
of
the
it.
language of either of them. It's not Hungarian because they're the Roman alphabet now, even in the 1800s.
I
So,
did read some of it was Enochian symbols.
which
I think it was stuff basically they just threw together to be like, hey, look, let's have something funky and crazy looking, spooky. Yeah.
which made no sense to me. I'm like, because you're supposed to be in the late 1800s. All these languages use the Roman alphabet.
I know. I was loving it. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Are there sigils on this? Sigil contracts? Did witches write this contract?
You don't know who his assistants are.
I mean, it would explain knock, I guess, a
I was
little
going to say
bit.
hair
but
knock.
if you were Hutter/Harker, you might be like, what am I having him sign? What is this?
What is this?
And yet, Hunter Harker does not care one bit. So the picture falls out, and Orlok is like, oh, she has a lovely neck.
Put a pin in this. We're gonna bring up this stuff later in the second movie.
And can we just, for a moment, if anyone ever says that about anybody, questions. Although he is starting to have questions. So you're starting
We
to
would hope.
realize that he's
Yeah.
like, something feels a little off here. So at the same time, back where they come from, Ellen has started sleepwalking. And I love it because whenever she sleepwalks, you can tell because she's on tippy toe. That is universal sleepwalking, apparently. She puts her arms out and she's on tippy toe. Because we were like, why is she tiptoeing?
Well,
Is this
even
supposed to
if
be a
you are
dance?
asleep, you don't want to wake other people up, even in your sleep consciousness. Through the house.
You know you're awake, but they're asleep.
It really made me laugh, though. I was like, okay, she's tippy-toeing. And you get kind of the feeling that she is somehow psychically linked to her husband and kind of feels like he's in danger. Because then there are points where, like, he will be in imminent danger and she's like crying out. I mean, it's a silent movie, so she cries out. She makes an ah noise, like face. Yeah.
One point I want to address on this is it's interesting to see the silent films actors and actresses and their techniques. It's almost more of a theater aspect because you're relying on so much of the gesture and so much of the expression
Visual
to get
only,
things
so
across.
yeah. Very good point. It's just physical. Everything they do has to be
Definitely,
very emotive visually.
Mhm.
playing to the back of the room, as they would say in the theater.
Yeah,
Definitely,
that's true. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it is. It's very much like it's closer to mime than it is to what we would think of as acting today. Like,
My apologies.
you're fine. So back in Orlok's castle, Hutter starts to investigate because he's like, something feels wrong. And he goes kind of down into the basement and he finds a coffin. And then, even though there's a hole in the coffin and he can see Orlok through the hole, he still opens the coffin.
What's in here?
Gotta
I
make
can
sure,
see
I
what's in
guess.
here, but let's open it anyway.
Right, but I'm going to open it anyway because I really want him to be able to get out at me if he wants to. So he opens it anyway, sees Orlok, and then, like, shocked, climbs back up the stairs. And now he is pretty convinced his client is a vampire. And he keeps going back to the book, and it's like, I think he's a vampire, is what the book says.
Yeah,
And if you were
he
watching-
finally starts to believe it.
Checklist.
Right. And if you were watching with me, then I would have been reading that in a bad Bela Lugosi accent. So,
I want to hear the bad Bela Lugosi accent.
Yeah.
I was
Come
like,
on, Betsy, pony it up.
with a vampire, there is 2 fang marks in the neck. Did it the whole
Lovely.
time. So I'm somewhere between Bela Lugosi and Count Von Count from Sesame Street, which
I like that you threw his full name in there.
Yes.
Most people would just be the Count from Sesame Street, but you're like, I know.
And we don't know what you meant, but
Oh no. I have to give
Count
him
Count.
all of the credits. So he goes back to his room, and Nosferatu comes into his room and is very menacing. And then he like emerges from his bed a little while later and looks out the window, and the Count is loading up boxes onto a pallet, and then himself in his coffin onto this pallet, and you see him get taken away and off onto a ship. And so Harker Hutter's like, I gotta get out of here. And he sets off on a horse back home. And then it's like, I considered this the Amazing Race series, where you're seeing which one of them is going to make it back
Yeah.
first.
who gets back first? The ship that is suddenly stuck with the strange pestilence, which I did like how they sort of used the vampire also as a metaphor for illness,
Oh, yeah.
plague and illness.
Oh, yeah. It was really nice.
And then do you have single lone guy racing home? You know, who's going to win tonight at 11?
And at the same time, you find out that Hernock has been labeled as crazy and is in an asylum.
Oh,
so...
I love the beginning scenes when they have, you know, Hernock or Renfield, depending, you know, which version, when he's in the asylum. At one point, the doctor and the orderly are in there in the room with him. And I love the look on the orderly's face. The orderly is like, this guy is bonkers. And he's just like,
he's plucking the flies from the air and eating them. Also, total aside, but I have to give props to whoever did all the hair work for this. There were some amazing eyebrows, the Count's little hairs off of his ears, all of the mustaches. I don't know how many of those were real. There was some crazy facial hair in this. It was making me super happy. I will be honest. I'm like, I don't know if this is natural or if somebody was laying hair work, but well done to whoever did this, because I'm
given 1920s fashions, it was probably hair work.
I'm guessing. Yeah, because I'm like, they wouldn't have had those mustaches and beards. Also, I have the feeling that the guy who played Renfield was much younger than he was playing, because he was
spry.
Wow, he was spry. He also, like, his facial expressions were so good. He was great. I'm like, okay, Count Orlok is creepy. This guy is also really creepy.
Perhaps even more.
Yeah. So we start to see, like, the ship and the ocean passage is not going well. People keep falling ill. They end up burying people at sea. The captain is like, I just don't know what's happening. I just don't know. And then, like, there are moments with rats. Lots of moments with rats. So many rats on this movie. And by the time the ship gets to harbor, there is one person left. And it's the captain, who has literally tied himself to the wheel, but he's dead.
Which they also have in the book. So
yes, almost all of the ship thing in the plague comes straight from Dracula.
I was gonna say that part they pretty much stole. It was good though.
Yeah, it was almost lifted straight up.
Yeah, verbatim, nearly.
Part. But yeah, they pretty much stole that one. And almost basically at the same time, Harker Hutter makes it back, is reunited with his wife, and my favorite scene is Nosferatu carrying his giant box unseen through town.
Like, that's not going to be suspicious.
Can't see.
Tip, 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 tip. Big.
Was he on tiptoe? Did you notice? Because that might have been why he was able to do it.
That's how he's, he's stealth. He's on his tippy toes.
That probably was my favorite part, just because it made me laugh. I was like, you're not sneaking, Sweet Pea. You're just walking through town with a big box of dirt. Yep. But it's okay. Do what you gotta. So he gets set up across the way from them. Renfield's just getting crazier. And so Harker Hutter tells his wife not to read the book.
Don't read anything that might help protect you. No, just
So she does, because girls be
She's
reading,
Shocked
smarter
my
than him.
face.
right?
Yeah.
So she reads the book, and what she reads in the book is that the only way to stop a vampire is for a woman who is pure of heart to keep him by her side until the cock crows.
What does pure of heart even mean? I mean, she was married, so it can't be purity in the physical sense, right?
Yeah.
This is so honestly, Seth and I kind of discussed this. So what we decided it probably is that she decides to do it. Which
Willing
makes
to
her
sacrifice herself for others. I
Right.
guess it's
intent
pure of heart.
pure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
pure intent.
yeah, so she keeps seeing him across the way, and he's creepily watching her from the building across
Oh,
the way.
and the whole city/village is now under
Oh,
a
yeah.
plague.
And
Yeah, because
everybody's
the
like,
plague has been spreading and
The plague being Orlok eating people, but that's not the point. It's plague.
truth.
there's a plague, and everybody's dying, and there's like a crazy scene that was beautiful but crazy of the coffins being carried down the street just in a row, and it was beautiful. Parade of coffins. So Ellen goes back and reads the same passage again. We laughed because we were like, we just read this. It was 5 seconds ago. It's fine. We remember.
She's processing. Maybe she's trying to figure out
Yeah,
what pure
I know
heart is.
she's
too.
like,
It's like that when you read it and you're like, no, this can't possibly be what it says. Okay.
and then you read it.
Okay,
again,
fine,
like,
it is.
all right, fine. So she goes to the window where she knows Orlok is watching her, and you kind of feel like she's like, well, come get me.
Hey,
Here I am,
Miss
all
Dracula,
alone.
Come on.
And so she swoons. Pretty much because you know that Orlok is coming for her. And Jonathan Thomas, whoever he is like, I'm gonna go get the professor. Oh, I forgot. There's also a professor who's vaguely Van Helsing, who talks a whole lot about like plants that eat things, vampiristic plants, which I'm like, actually, that's not vampiristic plant. That is just a carnivorous plant. But okay, whatever. They don't eat each other. Moot. So he goes to get the professor / doctor, which mine actually used that interchangeably, the version that I watched. I have no idea who this guy was. All I know is that he was wearing the craziest robe the whole time.
But that's how you know he's the learned man, I guess.
I guess. Because then I was like, can you please take off your robe? And then he did, and I laughed. So he goes to get him because he's like, my wife is sick. Come see my wife. And then the coolest scene where they use the shadow of Count Orlok's hand in and up and over her, and then he grabs her heart and she goes, and it's like, oh, that is so good. And so he comes in and it's like he's obviously bewitched her, and then he feeds from her.
And you can imagine how in the 1920s this would have been so scary.
So
Or, they would have been terrified.
Well, yeah,
like,
shocking creature a man creeps into your room while you're sleeping, and yeah.
And just that, like,
imagery and the
shadow can do that.
Yes.
He doesn't have to touch you. So he feeds from her, and suddenly the cock crows. And you realize she's done it. And he, contorts, and then he sees the sun, and then he goes over toward the window, and he does creepy, and then he poofs.
She has saved the day at the expense of herself.
Which is the fact of him dying by the sunlight. That was a Murnau thing.
Yep. Yeah, that
was one of the first times I think that they brought in that sunlight.
Yep. No, in actual Dracula, he says that they're uncomfortable in the sunlight, but he can go in the sunlight. Mm-hmm. So that was completely his creation. He just thought it would look really cool if they had him poof out, which it did.
Did.
So I get it. And so she ends up living just long enough for her husband to come in and hug her, and she dies and she sacrificed herself, and suddenly the plague is gone, and then it goes to Renfield and he's like, the master is dead, and he gets all like wilty.
And Hutter/Harker is broken.
I was gonna say, and he's broken because his wife is gone, and that's pretty much it. And it's still really good.
Yes. Yeah, for anybody.
Go ahead, Veronica.
No, I was just saying, for anybody who hasn't seen it and is kind of like put off by the notion of a silent film, I think you'll find yourself pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I had watched it before, but watching it again, I'm like, I did not remember how good this is. It really is, like, really fun and really interesting.
So, but interestingly, not actually the first vampire movie. In 1921, there was Dracula's Death. It was filmed in Hungary. The director was Karoli Latje. Sorry, my Hungarian is terrible. And there's no surviving copies. And the only reason they even know it existed is because they found old like reviews and mentions of it and playbills. But
it doesn't exist because of Bram Stoker's widow. He sued them and they had to destroy all copies. And unlike the Murnau version, where it got kind of widespread before she caught it, this one didn't. So there were no like copies. So it is a destroyed piece. Like there are a couple of still images from like posters, but that's all you have of it. It is
that makes me sad.
I know. Although my understanding of the plot of that one was that Dracula was a musician,
a
crazy musician, and came after Mina. I don't know why I feel like they need to change.
It was really smart of Albin Murnau to come up with Nosferatu instead of putting Dracula in the name, because that's probably why the widow didn't pick up on it so quickly.
First right away, yeah.
I believe so.
And not using the name Dracula at all in it and sticking with Orlok was probably
right.
A good thing there. Because there are other vampire books besides Dracula, and have been, but for a long time, but none as iconic.
No.
Yeah.
So that leads us to number 2.
Oh, 2 more points. Sorry.
No, go for it.
The sets and everything, the sets, the makeup, the costuming, that also was Albin Grau. He was basing the look off of a book called The Golem, which was a classic horror story by Gustav Magnate, I believe. I might have that written down badly. But so the eerie looks and the makeup and stuff was him. And a lot of the effects that you see was Murnau's brilliance and done by stop motion photography.
Very early stop motion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just random key points. And again, to reiterate, I have no attention span, so it was a little difficult for me to watch, not because I didn't want to, but because I would look away and be like, shit, what did I miss? Yeah.
It's hard because with a silent film, you have to keep your eyes on the screen. You know, you can't be doing something else.
It helped me to be reading all of the stuff aloud, because then I kept my eyes on the thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but my poor husband had to deal with all of my accent work as I was watching it, because everyone.
How could he not love it though?
Everyone who wasn't badly Romanian was British, so you know, I was having fun.
Yeah. So sorry. Now, Shadow of the Vampire. Let's do this.
Shadow of the Vampire from 2000.
Excellent film.
Oh,
good cast.
My goodness.
So good. I had never watched it before. So.
Oh, you hadn't?
No.
Oh, yeah, I had, but it was.
I think I saw it the year it came out.
I did, because I remember seeing it in the theaters with my now ex-husband.
Yeah, I'm like, it's been a minute. It has been a minute, but
it holds up.
Forgotten the cast, and I was like,
phenomenal cast. Oh my God.
Eddie showed up, and I was like,
yes, yeah.
Gary Elways.
I know.
Eddie, and
they were John Malkovich.
And they were all so good.
It is
so good,
so well acted, so fun, and it's all based on the premise that Max Schreck was actually a vampire. So.
To be fair to poor Max Schreck, before you all think he didn't exist, he was in fact an actor, and a very good one and fairly prolific one. So you can look up his other films.
Oh yeah,
and give him his credit for Nosferatu. But the movie, the fictional movie,
the reason it's only because he was
so good.
Primarily German. That he wasn't as well known. So when it went to like places like England where they didn't watch a whole lot of German films, I'm guessing they were like,
Who's
who is
this guy?
guy? Is he a vampire? But so this film stars John Malkovich as Murnau, and he's a very intense Murnau. My understanding of the actual Murnau is Murnau was actually very quiet spoken and very easygoing, and he's a very intense, like kind of driven Murnau.
Yeah.
But
Controlling.
One might say obsessed.
yes,
There you
but it
go.
works for the film.
Absolutely.
Yes, it does.
So I'll take it. And they're filming some of the basic scenes, like that starts out with the scene with her with the cat. And then like one of them makes a joke about how they gave the cat laudanum so it would stand still.
Which, by the way, laudanum and opium play a big part in this film.
Oh,
Oh yes.
God. So much laudanum, so much morphine. I'm like, Jiminy Christmas, people. And then they say, well, who's going to be playing the vampire? We don't know who's going to be playing the vampire. And this is coming from Albin, who is the producer.
Producer Alvin Graw. He's
Yeah. And they said, well, he's already on set and he studied with Stanislavski, which I thought was the funniest method acting joke that I'd ever heard. Because in the 1920s, Stanislavski was teaching in Russia and he was super method. So he believed in like getting super into the part. And so they actually put a line in there about him studying with Stanislavski. And you're like, oh, so he's supposed to be super method. So that's how they were getting away with him being like a full vampire the whole time. He's just method. He's
a little bit of theater in jokes.
Yes. It's real good. So it starts like that. Then they go get on a train, which I read that that particular train's name was the Chiron, which
I noticed that immediately. I'm like, oh, I don't think I caught that the first time around when I watched the film.
no.
As well as Greta's line when because initially she's complaining about having taken the role, and she's theater gives me life. This takes life from you. So put a pin in that.
Oh, there's so much. It's so good. So they get on the Chiron and they head to I think they say they had to
Czechoslovakia in the movie.
Czechoslovakia, yeah. So they had to Czechoslovakia.
Which back in the day, that's what it was called before it split to the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Right. So they had to Czechoslovakia where they're going to find their count and be filming for a while because they're actually going to be filming in the place where the count lives. I have so many questions for the crew on why they just let this happen, but okay. So
a very iron-controlled director at that point in time.
So they get there and they are setting up in the little inn, and the people there are very superstitious. They have crosses everywhere. And you find out that Eddie Izzard is playing Gustav, who is the actor who plays the
Hucker/Hutter.
Yeah, Hutter's role. And then they are filming some of the scenes in the inn in this little inn. And the detail they went to get what the actual film was, because I literally watched them like one in a row, and I was like,
I did the same thing.
Little details of the film that I'm like, this is amazing, like how they did.
Yeah,
it
they
looks
did
like a documentary almost.
It's almost. They were. You had to think they were sitting with the stills, side by stills and storyboarding, going, okay, how are we going to do these shots? Because in some cases you could hardly tell that it was the recreation only by looking. You're like, oh, Eddie Izzard. But and in some cases, I loved that they were using the original stills.
Yes.
The original shots.
They were doing it like seamlessly going between them, so you're like, this is a little twisty, it's a little mind bendy, the going back and forth between them. So they finish at the end, and I believe it's like the next day they're going to go out and they're going to start shooting, and they're going to introduce them to Count Orlok. So it starts with the driver coming up and him getting in the mysterious carriage, and then he goes up, and then they're going to have the doors open magically. And it's really fun to like hear him giving the direction, like, who is that man? What's going on? Who is this? Why did the doors open by themselves? And he's like telling him how to act.
Yeah.
And he's like reacting like big to everything. Very fun. And then you see Max for the first time. And they did a really good job of making Willem Dafoe look like only. I think it's kind of funny because what they did is they made Willem Dafoe look like Max Schreck if Max Schreck really looked like that.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't makeup, if it was what his face actually looked like. So well done to them, because
wow. Well, Dafoe he's not quite Gary Oldman Mask of 1,000 Faces, but he still manages to in many different movies.
Dafoe is far better than Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
But also Dafoe is extra. Like he is so extra. Like I think he takes his parts about like, what can I play that will allow me to be more than the role will ever need?
He dials it up to an 11 straight off.
And I'm here for it, but it's so funny at the same time.
Yeah.
So he creeps everybody out, like obviously creeps everybody out. And then in this scene, the current cameraman kind of follows him into like the dark and then collapses. And so you kind of get the feeling that he's been feeding off of this cameraman for a while.
Well, there's another scene before that when they're still in the hotel that I actually, on a second rewatch, I caught that I didn't the first time, where Eddie Izzard's character hears like a noise, a howling or something. Yes. He goes in and he sees a window open and he shuts it, and then he looks over and there's, I think they called him Wolf. Was that the cameraman's name? He's like shaking against the wall.
Yes. Yeah, and that seemed where Wolf's character was shaking against the wall seemed a little similar to in the silent film at one point where you see like the main character hiding away.
Yes.
But when I rewatched, I thought, that was probably the first attack.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you get like the feeling that this is not the first time that he's fed off this guy, because this guy is not going to recover.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also very early on start to see that Orlok
does not care.
He doesn't care, and he's starting to bring in his own idea of what he wants.
Oh yeah, and it seems like he has like at first you just think he has like a tenuous relationship with Murnau, and then you start to realize that it's really, really bad, like questionable, the deal that has been made. And Murnau's like, "You killed one of my people," and he's like, "I might have."
Yeah. Well, actually, that was the thing. They never really say if Wolf recovers or not, but you assume he's going to die. But he leaves the movie still alive.
I believe that at some point, though, somebody does say like,
but at that point in time, you don't know if he's going to live.
You don't know if he's going to die or not.
And that's what I love, because Orlok was like, "Did I kill him? He wasn't dead when I walked away. Did I kill him?" So
Murnau has to leave for a minute because he's like, "Well, now I have to find us a new cameraman." So he goes off to find a new cameraman and to talk to the money, because the money is like, "What are you doing?" And leaves everybody building the also,
sorry, I didn't want to stop, but I know that Rebecca, you wanted to bring up the scene with the locket and Greta, and that happens before he goes and runs off and gets it.
Because he does it. They do it in this film as well. He sees the locket, and that's where you start to see some of the ad lib of the Count, and you get an idea of his spirit coming into play, because the Count leaves the locket. She has lovely bosoms.
Would you just see everybody on set at that time go, just snatch the locket back, keep filming.
It'll be fun for the lip readers. And again, they do a good job of recreating the old scene to the new scene, because Orlok does do the same thing where he's fascinated with Eddie Izzard's character actually cutting himself, and the director more or less setting him up to fall that way.
Oh, and there's a lovely foreshadowing scene where you have Eddie Izzard's character who's touching up his makeup in a mirror, in a handheld mirror, and William Dafoe as Orlok is walking in, and you can see the focus on the mirror. There's no reflection. It's a very small scene. You can see there's no reflection, but Orlok makes a noise or something. They turn and they see him, and they're like, "What the hell did you come from?" But they don't quite catch the fact that they weren't seeing him in the mirror at that point.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're right. I forgot about that one.
Where you're like, what is happening here?
So, yes. I'm trying to remember.
And Orlok's entrancement with the camera and the filming process, you see that start to come out.
I would like makeup. You don't get any.
Oh yeah,
that was my favorite. I want makeup. You don't get any.
Two things. Like, one, you're not entirely sure if he really wanted makeup or if he just wanted to continue to stare at the makeup girl's, body,
boobs,
whatever. Or if it was that, and he also was like, "I'm a star. I want makeup."
I think, you had a little bit of that, and some of this, I forget when the speech is when Orlok. No, that comes later. When Orlok is discussing what it is like to be a vampire, what it is like to be eternal.
Yes, that's when he and after Manoa's left, they're building the ship because he refuses to go on a ship. So they're building the ship set in the ruins so that they can film the at least some of the ship there. And Murnau is gone, and it's Albin and
the scriptwriter, I think, but I can't remember his name to save my life.
Why did you eat the photographer? Why couldn't you have eaten the script girl? I'll eat her next.
Why don't I just eat the scriptwriter? We need him still.
I am loath to admit, but we need the writer. That scene between Murnau and Orlok has some of the best dialogue.
Great dialogue and intent.
Oh, good.
Well,
and you get some of the extra that is Willem Dafoe with the nails and the clinking and the twittering.
Mm-hmm.
Which honestly, if I had those nails, I'd be doing all the time too. Like clicky,
clicky,
clicky, clicky, which is why I don't.
And I think that brought some of the physicality and eeriness back to the role.
Absolutely. It was well done.
Oh, good. So they're having a conversation, and that is, they're like chatting in front of the boat. They're drinking heavily. And this is when he's like, "Oh, I once saw somebody pull
ectoplasm
out of their mouth." He's like, "Oh, what did it look like? Seaweed?" And
which
he's
it
like,
probably was.
What's the magical thing that you've ever seen? And he's like, "I once saw Greta Schroeder naked."
Which is the actress playing Nina.
Yes. And he says, "Oh, that is more impressive." And that was very funny. And then Shrek kind of comes out and is like chatting with them. And they're like, talking about the Dracula book, because in this, they know that the Dracula book exists. They know that they're faking the Dracula book. And they asked him if he read it, Shrek. And he's like, "It made me really sad." And they're like, "Why sad?" And he's like, "He's been alone for 700 years. He had no servants. Do you think he remembered how to buy bread? Do you think he remembered how to
make a bed?
Things? Mm-hmm. Yeah, make a bed." He's like, "This is not something for him." And I was like, oh, that's hard.
It's a sudden bit of depth that you don't expect, and it hits you out of nowhere. And you're like, oh my.
Like, oh, I guess I could see why. Oh, I kind of feel for him. Although he's still really scary. And then
only a little bit.
Oh, ate the bat. Yeah, that was lovely. Great scene. He just snags it out the air.
And Albin and
just kind of go with it with a vague look of disgust on their face, but they're like, okay.
Honestly.
Wow, he's really into that method acting.
I was going to say, honestly, in their head, they were going, "God, method actors. Ugh, they're the worst." And then he's drinking their... Oh my God, he's throwing back that schnapps like crazy. The vampire.
But you do see Albin wipe off the top after that. He's like, "There's bat blood on here."
Yeah, that was a nice little gesture there on that one. It's the tiny touches throughout this whole film that really make it.
There's so many little bitty things that it's like, oh, you guys thought of everything. So the new I know what I'm trying to say. Cameraman arrives, and it's Carrie
There
Elwes.
is that lovely scene on the boat, though,
Oh.
right after Orlok / Shrek wanders off. You just see him kind of scurry towards the boat, and he grabs somebody. You don't
Yeah,
know
I
him,
have it
somebody
written
that's
down
stabbed,
as
trains
Orlok
him and
eats
just throws
scenery
him
guy.
over. What was it? I'm sorry, Rebecca.
I have it as Orlok eats scenery guy.
Yeah. Which it's a lovely bit
Yeah.
of cinematography where he eats him and throws him over. You just see this body just kind of gracefully fall off the side. Yeah, sorry. And then Betsy.
Mhm.
Yeah. So then the new camera guy arrives. Is Carrie Elwes. Murnau's not back yet, but he immediately starts setting them up to start recording some of the additional scenes. And I believe they do the crypt scene with the
Yeah.
where you can see Orlok through the lid, and then he opens the lid, and then he backs up the stairs. All
Yeah, but you have to talk about Carrie Elwes' entrance.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
'Cause
Are
it
you
was
loaded?
epic.
Good. So am I.
He was just like,
So good.
I'm here. No, I'm not a doctor, but I have dabbled in
In
pharmacology myself.
pharmaceuticals.
You know, yeah, there you go, pharmaceuticals. And then
Yeah.
he's like straight to filming, like boom, like he jumps up. He's like, all right, you got the camera set, great. And then fires off some shots in the air to create a panic with the crowd. And he's like, did you get that? Good. He's like, I wish I could have set it up a little more because we could have slow motioned it and stuff. And the staff is looking at him like, I don't even know what just happened.
Everybody just kind of stares like, oh shit, what is this?
But it was just awesome. I mean, he just took the scene. I mean,
He was really chewing some scenery on this one.
which you know, I still think Carrie Elwes is an underused and underrated actor. You know, like
Agreed.
I don't know what happened after Princess Bride, but it's just like he's in some good stuff after that. But it's almost like he had like a bad agent or something, and he just got into roles, and he should have.
Or he was having trouble getting other ones to avoid being typecast.
Could be that too.
There was some of that. I know, like he's talked about, like some of the roles he was offered. He's like, I mean, because he was offered Robin Hood from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Was he? I know he did Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah,
and
he did Robin Hood Men in Tights later. He turned down Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves because he thought it was too close to The Man in Black.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but when Mel Brooks comes calling, you say yes.
Yeah, you answer. You say, what time do I need to be there?
Yeah. So he was like, Mel Brooks called, and I was like, of course, I don't care. Yes, I'm in. Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in. And so that's literally what happened. But yeah, he was offered Prince of Thieves, and he was like, no, I think it's too close to stuff I've already done. I really don't want to do that again.
That would have been an entirely different movie.
Probably would have been much better.
I was gonna say,
agree.
I'm gonna say it would have been a better movie.
Not a huge Kevin Costner film myself. Sorry.
I watched that completely for the Sheriff of Nottingham.
The Sheriff, I like Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman's wonderful.
I think everybody watches it for the Sheriff too. But
yeah, so he always comes in and is flashbang amazing. Just right off the bat. I'm like, oh.
That's the whole energy of the movie even shifts at that point.
It does. It suddenly ramps up. It's like it kicks into high gear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like, oh, we've got stuff to do and we need to get it done now.
Yeah.
And that's the energy he brings. So
yeah, they did a little bit more, I think, of the modern footage and vintage footage aside with some of the stuff that he was supposedly shooting as well. That I thought had a creepy edge. And a nice, there is something about Carrie Elwes in one of the next scenes. When Greta is on her little bender, her little drug bender, which I want to say as an aside, if she had taken morphine, I don't think she's going to be that bubbly and effervescent.
Well, when she's off it, she could be like, my guess is she could do ups and downs, but the scene where they have her, with her boobs all hanging out, writhing.
Yeah, that one.
That didn't seem quite right. She should have been a lot more lethargic.
Exactly. I'm like,
not that I'm an expert on morphine usage, but
like, I've had opiates before, including one experience with an injectable. It was in the hospital, mind you, so it was allowed. And the last thing I was, boobs flopping out and woohoo!
Great. We haven't showed any tits in this movie yet. How do we integrate boobs into it? Oh, well,
we're going to show some boobies in this film. But there's a little bit with she gets locked in during that. And is that the photographer? You see him lock her in. Is that the photographer keeping her safe during binge, or does the photographer suspect something with the film?
Yeah.
Does he suspect something with Orlok?
One does wonder.
Mhm.
One does, yeah. Like, is she a danger to herself, or is he trying to keep her safe? We don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, when you brought up that the coffin scene, like, people are starting to wonder about it. You know what I mean? Like, there he's perfectly still, and Carrie Elways as Fritz is just very like flippant about it, but you can still see he's kind of giving a look, like, okay, you really are doing this, huh? Are you really doing this? Or is
Yeah.
this who you are? And the same thing. So we've got Greta on the morphine, and then all of a sudden we hear some noise from Bruno's room, who's on laudanum. So it's morphine versus morphine, really. But
Seriously.
but his effect on morphine is more in
A little
keeping.
realistic. Yeah. A little more realistic.
Very lethargic, kind of zoned out.
Somewhere in there, we also find out, I've forgotten when, but at some point in here, we also find out that his bargain with.
Yeah. It's the scene. It's when they go check on him and he's all hopped up on laudanum. He reveals
he's
that Orlok is a vampire.
Greta to her or to him.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So he gets to be in the film, and then he gets Greta, and you're like, oh, guys. Wow. Okay.
You start to get an uncomfortable edge to the film at that point.
Because not only is, so he made a deal with the devil, and his deal was, I'll hand you over this woman like it's his property or his ability, just like she was chattel, nothing, fine.
Oh, yeah.
You just act in my masterpiece.
I have a lot more to say on that when we get into those scenes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
that was horrible.
after they find him on laudanum and he admits to them what he's done, they're like, well, then we need to shoot the scene now. Because things are getting too wild. Too many people are dying. It's getting crazy. We need to shoot these scenes.
Yeah, and to be fair, it seems like their plan is to try to get it shot and save the girl. Is what it kind of seems like with these three.
Initially, yes. You feel like that is what they're like. If we can save her, fantastic. Let's try to do this. Let's get this done. Let's film the scenes, and then we can betray him at the end.
Mm-hmm.
No.
But the scenes, let's get the scenes shot.
Yes.
So this is the scene that in the film is when the hand comes up and is all creepy and grabs her with the shadow. And so it's that ending scene.
Of course, there's one moment before that scene when she walks into it, when all the guys are there, and she's like the last one to arrive, and the atmosphere is that heavy, tense, oh fuck atmosphere. And she walks in and she's like trying to get a rise out of people, and then she's like, who died? I'm like, that's very prophetic. Right?
No one yet, honey, but just wait a second.
Yeah, just hold on, somebody might.
We're hoping no one.
Yeah, and then she starts to get ill at ease because she's like, there's something.
She's like, something wrong. And she's the one who does kind of I almost call it the audience big reveal, She sees once he's in the room after that shot of the shadow of
the shadow.
And
Orlok leans over her and she looks over.
And that's when she catches it. There's no reflection in that big old mirror over there.
And rightfully panics.
Yes.
It's like, there's no reflection. She's drawing everybody's attention to it, but everybody already knows he's a vampire except her.
And here, she's screaming, trying to get this reality, saying, look, this is the reality.
You see it too.
This.
What is wrong with you? Yeah.
Right.
And
everybody can see
it.
And nobody's giving her, obviously, the affirmation that she's not lost it because they don't want to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they need to get it on film.
And worse yet, they inject her with some more morphine.
Yeah.
So now she can't even defend herself.
That was horrible. That was horrible.
I found these whole sections extremely uncomfortable to watch this time around. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's some of our experience.
Well, it's definitely an analogy of a rape.
So,
You know what I mean? Where
yeah,
they have
yeah.
basically,
Oh, it's as
you
plain
know,
as day
And it's that,
comparison.
maybe it's also some of the like
it effectively was these men standing around, not only watching it happen, but contributing it to it happening.
yeah,
You know,
it's
Yeah.
very like, I don't want to use the words like bro culture, where it's
Mhm.
like, we're not stopping him, we're not necessarily egging him on, but we're
But
not
we're not
stopping
helping.
him.
Yeah.
we're going to let it happen, and we're not going to say or do anything about it after either. Yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, and they go really sexual. And I mean, whereas in the original silent film, obviously they don't have any groping of any sort during the vampire feeding scene on this woman. His hands were very clearly not on her body, and his face
Right.
is, but it's up by a neck.
I was gonna say it's
Whereas
by her neck, but you can even like see like in certain scenes, like
it's not
it's not even
touching.
resting on her. No, he's near her neck, but he's not like chewing on her or anything.
But enter Defoe when she's like, drugged up, and his hands are all squeezing her breast, and he's all drooling on her, and it's all very.
The fact in the IMDb was he held on to her breast for 5 full minutes while shooting
Good
that.
Lord.
Which I hope somebody spoke to that actress first, because
I-
consent.
Seriously,
Mhm.
5 full minutes.
Generally, scenes are very, any scenes with intimate contact, I guess, for lack of better terms, are highly choreographed, and they're
Right.
supposed. Well, let me rephrase that. They're supposed to be highly choreographed, movement by movement out ahead of time.
Right. So I hope that this was all spoken of. I would almost guess that it was, only because he made the comment about her bosoms earlier.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you always wonder, because you know how Hollywood treats women, especially back before the Me Too era,
Yeah.
where if you're going to act, you should just expect to get groped. So even though they may mention her bosoms earlier, it wouldn't mean that the actress was fully aware or prepared
Aware.
to have
Yeah.
her breast groped for 5 minutes by a dude in
Mhm.
front of the cameras, And we like to hope that this was
Hope.
talked about, discussed, and worked out, but as
Hope.
far as I know, I haven't seen any accusations, allegations pop up about Willem Dafoe, but
Mhm.
Who knows?
yeah. But
But so she's out cold. He's feeding on her. It's pretty obvious, like he's draining her at
Yeah.
this point.
now,
And
to
that's
be honest, is this when they start intervening?
I
And
was
trying
gonna
to
say,
kill
and
him?
yes, that's when they
start
try to start intervening.
Yes.
They pull on some kind of chain / counterweight system, I guess, that was supposed to open the door to where they were filming, and you hear a line, "He's cut the chain," or "Warlock's cut the chain."
Yeah, they try to shoot him with a gun. Somebody tries to knock him. I think he kills Fritz, which Carrie Always' character, right? And
Yeah.
does he
Yes.
kill Albin too, or no?
I mean, it looks like he snaps
I
both of
am
their
not
necks.
entirely certain.
It
But,
kind of looked like he snapped both their necks, because then Murnau's trying to talk to Albin, and Albin is eyes open, not moving. So
That's
at
what
the
I
very
thought.
least, he's paralyzed. Because he's telling him, you need to put this in the shot. You need to put this in the shot, or it ruins the shot.
hmm Yeah, well, that's the thing. Murnau then, just once these attempts fail, he takes over cinematography and he starts directing Orlok, to do the scenes. He's like, you need to be in the frame or it doesn't exist, and tells him to mimic death. And I have to give a moment for William Dafoe's extraness. So in the original movie, when Shrek goes and does his death, you see this slight arch, and this slight moving back from the sun. Defoe does a full back bend, like almost into a Turkish drop from belly dance.
Right?
Like, just so much more. Because he's like, no, if I'm doing it, I'm getting extra.
Drama.
If I'm doing a death scene, I'm doing a
I'm doing
major
Matrix,
death scene. Yeah.
And it looks lovely. It's very theatrical, but it's also clearly extra.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
And
As
then
I've mentioned earlier, Defoe's whole process is very extra. I'm sorry, my camera keeps shaking. The cat keeps. But,
Cat's like, go over here, go over here.
Yeah,
Rebecca, if it's not in frame, it doesn't exist.
Well, let me tell you, Edgar should certainly be in frame. It would certainly be existing largely in frame. If you
Oh,
were
there he is.
if you were on camera.
Or is that Edgar?
It's
It's your black one.
Oh yeah, he passed a little bit in the background because
Because I just see
he's
a
over
cat's
on
butt, so.
yeah he's over on the bed now harassing the dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
But-
So then the rest of the crew breaks in finally, gets the
And
door open,
And the
sunlight shoots
hits.
sunlight shoots in, and then he kind of really dies. And everybody's like,
What happened?
What happened? And you see what I thought was a nice shot of the scene of the bedroom with Greta and everything. This little pile of ash sitting on the floor with some steam tendrils rising.
And I think at this point, don't you have like, isn't Murnau also yelling for the clapboard to end it?
yes.
Yes.
Still so focused. The vampire's dead. Half his crew's dead. He's like, clapboard. Somebody grab the clapboard.
I need an end board, please.
Yep.
And so the guy comes over and like holds it up and then turns it upside down because that's for editing. And then they fade. And you're like,
That was it.
wow, that's a
And you're just left sitting there going, what just happened?
But yeah, truly an excellent movie. Betsy, I'm so glad you picked these because, like I said, I've watched Nosferatu before in age ago, but I had never seen Shadow of the Vampire. And
I'm glad you had
boy,
the
am I glad I
chance to.
did.
Yeah. Well, did you watch them back to back?
Yes.
Okay.
And then separately too. It's like
that's
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. So I'll watch them. I watched them back to back first because you have to, and then like over time I kept rewatching them, and they weren't necessarily back to back then, but
Yeah.
I experienced one back to back.
highly advise people to watch them back to back if you can
I
find
think you
Shadow
get-
of the Vampire.
Yeah. I got it from the library. So my advice to any listeners, check your local library systems. You might be able to borrow it from there because it is
Or buy
damn
a
hard
copy.
to
It's
find.
worth it.
I was gonna say,
Yeah. I was having trouble finding copies
You
I
might.
bought
that were affordable.
I bought
Yeah.
mine on eBay. Like,
Mhm.
it wasn't super expensive, but it wasn't the cheapest thing I've ever bought on eBay. But also, I'm
Yeah.
like, I know I like it. So the fact that I don't own it already is pretty sad. So I just went ahead and bought it.
I probably owned it at one point, and for all I know, I still own a copy
I feel that.
because I haven't looked at my DVDs in a while. So
I feel that too. I have like a wall
Yeah.
of them. I'm like, I don't
I
know what's
know.
in there. Don't ask me.
yeah,
To be fair
Yeah.
though, they are intermingled with my roommates, so they're not all mine on the wall, but I still
Mhm.
can tell you
Yeah.
half what mine are.
yeah.
Sadly.
I think with these two films, you definitely get the most out of them as a pair.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean,
Because some of the artistry of Shadow of a Vampire, you need the history background of having seen Nosferatu first.
yeah.
I mean, you could watch them separately
Yeah.
and never watch
Oh yeah,
both of
because
them,
each
but to
each
get
one
the full
stands.
effect.
Yeah. Each one stands very well on its own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but for a true
Absolutely.
treat, watch them both.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And back to
Yeah.
back, like they're saying. Definitely watch Nosferatu first, though, because you want to
Yes.
experience it as a piece in and of itself before you get
Mhm.
everything revealed to you. Well, also, maybe don't
Ye-
watch this before you watch them.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no kidding. Maybe we should put a spoiler alert at the beginning of this, but then again,
if you haven't
anybody's gonna know that we discussed the whole movie.
if you haven't seen 1922 movies and year 2000 movies yet, sorry.
You never know. You never
Spoiler.
know.
Yeah. And there's several places you can watch Nosferatu streaming for free.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Like even if you don't have an Amazon Prime membership, you can find it, I think, on some other random apps like Tubi or something like that. I think it's
Mhm.
I'm positive there's probably a bootleg copy on YouTube as well. I
Oh,
don't know what the
sure.
quality is of it, but it's there.
Yeah. I remember at one point seeing a copy that had been like where the sound had been remastered and where they essentially the individual did their own sound. I can't remember if that was, and that may have been from the long, long ago days when Netflix still mailed out DVDs.
Well, I read somewhere that there are versions of this that you can find out there with more traditional orchestrations. There's one that has a jazz soundtrack. There's one that has a techno soundtrack that you can find out there if you are
Techno
so
silent
inclined.
film. That one's a curious one. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
So I thought that was kind of odd. But I'm like, now I want to watch more of them and see how
I
the
mean, is it
music
like
plays
goth
to it.
techno or is it techno? Because just saying,
I mean, if it was goth techno, that could be really fun.
really,
Like,
really fun.
Yeah. You could have it playing in
that
a goth club.
like, you could have this movie playing in a goth club anyway. It's,
Oh well, I'm
Pretty
sure it
sure it
has.
has been playing at goth clubs
Yeah.
we've been to.
I'm
I'm sure at Outlands it was on the background at some point.
yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
absolutely, it was. I can't prove that, but yes.
It'd be very wrong if it wasn't.
Yeah. I'm not even gonna take the bet because I know you're right.
I did
I
come
didn't
out
go
of
there
this
that often, but I'm sure it was.
deciding I need a pair of vampire teeth for my very front teeth. Like, why? Why his very front teeth?
Yeah, that was the other thing I thought was funny, like the choice to have like the buck fangs,
Mhm.
which you only ever see on, I think, in one other vampire movie, and that was is it Salem's Lot?
Salem's
Or Evil
Lot.
Things, maybe.
But
So maybe two more.
but both of those were based off of Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
So I was gonna say, and then also What We Do in the Shadows, their one roommate is basically a Nosferatu, so he has the front fangs.
I think this one is, Stoker, and this film and Shadow of the Vampire as well rely on the thread of mythology where the vampire is this nasty, malformed, disgusting creature.
Yeah.
So.
Although apparently Shadow of the Vampire had a B plot that got cut where Murnau finds him because he's dating the woman who sired him in Weimar, Berlin.
Ooh.
Oh,
That would have been an interesting
really?
plot.
Yes, but this was a cut plot.
That's
But
sad.
at
Were there
one point
deleted
he
scenes of
says,
that?
at one point he says, what did he say? She told me where to find him.
Ah,
And that is still from where
they had the plot. Because I do
that was
remember
that little
the
plot.
Laudeman scene where he said that he read about it or he heard about it in a class in a book, and he followed clues in the book to find him.
Yeah, apparently there was at one point like
The other plot.
another
But
plot, but it made it.
Orlok himself says it was a woman that made him, and he,
Yes, and
So
that's
in
so
there.
the idea was like that he found the woman and then she introduced him to Orlok.
Now I really want to see at least the
want that
dialogue
plot
from
now.
that,
Right?
or I wonder if they even filmed any of the scenes for it, or if it got deleted from the script before that.
I would almost bet before it even got to filming, just
Yeah.
because it would have been a lot.
Yeah.
It'd been a lot longer unless they did just
Mhm.
abbreviated.
Yeah.
There was that one club scene right
Yeah.
after.
In the
And I
beginning, I
wonder
thought
if that's
they
what
did
they were going to put in the meeting or something.
probably they did a good job with that club scene, because Berlin in the 1920s, during the Weimar Republic, was a very cultured place.
Oh, absolutely. It was very open and LGBT and very liberated. And so
Then
that
fascism.
was very, and then fascism.
Yeah.
It comes after times of great liberation in the human past. So, that's great.
Oh, well,
But yeah.
then. On that note.
No kidding.
On that note, Nosferatu. I loved it. I highly recommend. It was kind of like visiting a wonderful old friend of a movie, honestly. So good. The actors for the silent film are amazing. The actors for for Shadow of a Vampire playing those actors are fantastic. I just can't get over Eddie Izzard.
I know, baby Eddie Izzard. I was like, look at them. He's so
It was
so young.
such a young guy. Oh no,
The
he
baby face
was so fun.
cheeks. And I was thinking they probably loved being in all that makeup too, because
Yeah.
They walked on and I was like, has Eddie Izzard ever been hotter than this? Because I personally think Eddie Izzard is kind of hot, but hey Eddie, what's up?
I adore them. I think that they are one of the best actors on so many different levels.
He's
Quite a
very fun.
range.
He's got, well, I mean, obviously his comic timing is always on par. So he's wonderful, especially when he has, you know, all the snark in the lines like he did, frankly, in this film.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was great. The whole cast is wonderful in The Shadow of the Vampire as well. And they did a really good job of finding people who look enough like the silent film actors, but aren't like twins, because that might have been a little too creepy. But they found people who looked enough like them that you could believe that this person with a whole bunch of makeup was this person.
Mhm.
It was really well done.
Yeah, it gave a great effect that it was like a documentary of the film while it was being filmed, even though you know for a fact it's obviously not, but it's still very, 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 it gives you that feel a lot.
Yes, it does. It's
Yeah.
so good. I like them so much. This was really fun.
I forgot how much I enjoyed the both of them, and especially how much I enjoyed the dialogue in Shadow of the Vampire.
So good.
So watch them. And then, chat with us about it. If you want to post in the group, if you want to
Absolutely.
post on the page, if you want to message us about what you think about that or any of the other stuff we watched, we'd like to hear from you. So do that.
Absolutely. If you have ideas for things that you'd love for us to watch at some point, let us know. We're going up through the 1970s. So this time we had kind of a rare outlier, but we may do this occasionally where if there's a modern movie that just pairs really well with a really good classic movie, we may
You're
take
going
it
to see
together
it.
like this. 'Cause
Yeah,
this just worked too
exceptions
well.
can certainly be made, you know, for
Yeah.
that, but it's just that our main focus typically cuts off in the 70s.
Yes. But this one just went too well together. It just seemed like two peas in a pod. So do them together. So
Yeah.
They are.
I'm not
With that,
sad.
this is Girls Ghost Ghouls, and I'm Jenny.
I'm Rebecca.
Thanks for watching, folks.
Bye.